What was David's condition for making a covenant with Abner? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of 2 Samuel on Walking Through the Bible. Today we're going to be discussing 2 Samuel chapter 3, verses 12 to 21. But before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, turn to 2 Samuel chapter 3, verse 12. But if you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So 2 Samuel chapter 3, beginning verse 12. Then Abner sent messengers on his behalf to David, saying, Whose is the land? Saying also, Make your covenant with me, and indeed my hand shall be with you to bring all Israel to you. And David said, Good, I will make a covenant with you, but one thing I require of you. You shall not see my face unless you first bring Michal, Saul's daughter, when you come to see my face. So David sent messengers to Ishbosheth, Saul's son, saying, Give me my wife Michal, whom I betrothed to myself for 100 foreskins of the Philistines. And Ishbosheth sent and took her from her husband, from Paltiel, the son of Laish. Then her husband went along with her to Bahurim, weeping behind her. So Abner said to him, Go, return. And he returned. Now Abner had communicated with the elders of Israel, saying, In time past you were seeking for David to be king over you. Now then, do it. For the Lord has spoken of David, saying, By the hand of my servant David, I will save my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines and the hand of all their enemies. And Abner also spoke in the hearing of Benjamin. Then Abner also went to speak in the hearing of David in Hebron, all that seemed good to Israel and the whole house of Benjamin. So Abner and 20 men with him came to David at Hebron. And David made a feast for Abner and the men who were with him. Then Abner said to David, I will arise and go and gather all Israel to my lord the king, that they may make a covenant with you, and that you may reign over all that your heart desires. So David sent Abner away, and he went in peace. In our last lesson, we learned that while reigning in Hebron, David took 4 additional wives to the 3 he had previously, with Michal having been given away by Saul while David was a fugitive. To the 6 wives that were with David when he was in Hebron at the beginning were born to him 6 sons, 3 of which will become rather notable in our future studies, namely Amnon, Absalom, and Adonijah. We shouldn't take from the example of David that God approved of men having multiple wives, for Jesus said in Matthew 19 that he didn't. But he tolerated it in the Old Testament because of the hardness of man's hearts, though it did have its consequences, as we will see in the life of David. God does not tolerate such today according to the New Testament, so Christians should not engage in such. Meanwhile, in Mahanaim, Abner and Ishbosheth had a falling out because of a dispute over Saul's concubine. It seems that Abner had taken Saul's concubine Rizpah for himself, something that Ishbosheth thought should not have been done, for a king's harem went to the next king under normal circumstances. Abner reminded Ishbosheth that he is only king really because of him, and that because of this rebuke, he would seek to make David king over all Israel, something Abner by that time saw as inevitable anyway, for God was with David. Coming to verse 12, we have Abner reaching out to David, seeking a covenant with him, telling David that with his defection, he can bring all Israel with him. That's how powerful Abner was and how weak Ishbosheth was, that Abner, the general, believed he could sway the elders of all the northern tribes to make David king, something that politically could have had the potential to weaken their power by making a man from Judah king, even if that was the right decision. David saw such a covenant a good thing, for David was likely tired of war, and he knew it was God's will to make him king over all Israel. However, before making a covenant with Abner, there was one condition. David wanted Michal, his first wife, returned to him. Back in 1 Samuel 25, verse 44, we read how Saul gave Michal to another man. But Saul had given Michal his daughter, David's wife, to Paltiel, the son of Laish, who was from Galim. We don't know how much time elapsed between Saul's act and 2 Samuel 3, but if Saul did this early on when David was fleeing from Saul, and this took place after 7.5 years of reigning in Hebron, we could be talking 10 to 15 years by this point. Why would David want Michal back? Well, first of all, back in 1 Samuel 18, we find that Michal loved David, and David loved her in return. Yes, David had married these other women, but David seemed to have a special place in his heart for Michal, his first wife. So he wanted her back for that reason. But there's also another reason, a political reason. For when Saul gave Michal to another man, it was a public disavowal of David, and equivalent to calling David an outlaw. David wanted that declaration to be reversed through the return of his wife, and so David forced Ishbosheth to publicly return her, I'm sure at Abner's urging. This would have been humiliating for Ishbosheth to publicly reverse an edict of his father, further weakening him. Now what about Michal and Paltiel, the man who married Michal? Were their feelings not taken into consideration? And in this matter, it doesn't appear that they were. Michal was David's wife, and therefore, no matter if she was happy, Michal could not be allowed to remain the wife of another man. And for Paltiel, he was married to another man's wife, which was wrong, even if it had the blessing of the king. That didn't make the situation any easier, though, as is evidenced by the fact that Paltiel followed on behind, weeping until they got to Bahurim, a city just outside the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem, where Paltiel was told by Abner to return home, for he was not going to follow them into David's territory in Judah for the return of Michal to David. With David's wife now returned to him, Abner turned his attention to Israel. He communicated with the elders of Israel that in times past they had been seeking for David to be king over them before Ishbosheth became king. Now was the time to do it. For David would deliver Israel completely from the hands of the Philistines, who had been tormenting them on and off for over 100 years by this point. The Lord was with David. Abner also spoke these words in the hearing of the tribe of Benjamin, the tribe of Saul, and the tribe that might have been the most loyal to the house of Saul. And Abner succeeded in convincing them to do so, something that Abner and 20 of his men came to report to David in Hebron. David was so pleased that he made a feast for Abner in his honor. After the feast, Abner agreed to bring all Israel to David so that they could make a covenant with him, and David could begin ruling over all Israel. But this feast that David held in Abner's honor would have severe consequences for Abner, something we'll deal with, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of 2 Samuel chapter 3, verses 22 to 30, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.